All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. This is Warrior Woman 91, and welcome to the Renegade Millennials. We now have our first show of 2017 and a new title provided by our very own Aaron Bandler. So I want to give all credit where credit is due, and many thanks for that. Yes, you deserve every bit of it. So lots of stuff has happened since our last show of the year, and we've got lots of cool stuff in store for the audience in upcoming episodes. So stay tuned for those announcements. And today our lineup of guests are all from the Daily Wire. Please welcome Pardes Seleh, Josh Yasmin, Aaron Bandler, and Grammy Award-winning correspondent from the Daily Wire, Michael Knowles, and his guest correspondent as well, the Donald Trump Chia Pet.
There it is.
There he is. There he is. He will provide expert commentary bigly, you guys.
He hasn't bloomed yet. I just planted him yesterday, but hopefully he'll sprout during the show.
Oh boy. Okay. So I'm very excited to have you all here. Quick audience note, all death threats, memes, and marriage proposals, please direct them to the comment section where I will not read them. And any questions you may have, please send to my Twitter account at WarriorWoman91, and we will have time at the end, hopefully, to answer your questions. So let's get started. The first thing I want, overall, the topic of today's discussion is going to be Obama's legacy over the last 8 years. And our first topic is going to be the hashtag Black Lives Matter kidnapping. I want to start out this discussion with Knowles. This past week we witnessed a really horrific byproduct of the state of race relations in the United States with the torture of a disabled man by a group of thugs in Chicago. Knowles, why don't you explain to our audience the circumstances surrounding that event and how did this man come to be tortured?
If the only way I knew about that event was watching CNN and Don Lemon, then the circumstances surrounding the event would be that the young people in that video were raised in bad households and the parents weren't around, and that's why they kidnapped and tortured a mentally retarded man after befriending him and possibly threatening to kill him. But fortunately for everybody, I don't only watch CNN and Don Lemon. So, you know, I mean, look, it's a terrible incident. It's obviously awful. Hopefully those people rot in jail. But what it really shows you is just the obscene narrative crafting that comes from CNN. And, you know, one of our writers, editor-at-large at the Daily Wire, John Nolte, is fond of saying, and actually made his Twitter name, CNN is Hitler Maximus. And watching this event, it's hard to disagree.
Yeah, it was quite, I think I made it probably through 5 seconds of that video before I had to turn it off. They made him drink out of a toilet, they made him bark like a dog, walk on all fours, and having people that do have mental disabilities that are close to me, that could have been that person, you know, that relative to me. It's really, really disturbing to watch the way they treated that person, and the fact that it does seem to have had some racial component, which, you know, is largely being ignored by this administration. So unfortunately, this is not the only example of barbarism and so forth that has been committed. And really, it speaks to the state of race relations around the country, even in our institutions. Pardes, why don't you tell us about this problem with whiteness class that is being taught on one of the college campuses?
Sure. So at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, they've got this class called The Problem of Whiteness, which, as you can imagine, is very clear in what it considers to be a problem on college campuses. So I'm just going to read you like the syllabus. Okay, so the problem of whiteness class. So a few of the objectives for students are learning how to dismantle feelings of superiority that come with whiteness. Also understanding what it means to be #woke, which I feel like if you're not on Twitter, then you might not even understand what that is. But basically trying to bring white students to understand some of why they should be guilty for being white, and also like how they should be like subconsciously made to feel guilty for their race, just for who they are and what their presence is doing to people of color, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But
yeah, it's
basically, yeah.
Well, it's kind of just antithetical to what I at least grew up on the idea of Martin Luther King, content of the character over color of the skin. But go ahead and continue.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is like a violent course. If you had a course like this about the problem with blackness, or the problem with being colored or being Hispanic or whatever, like this would make like national news headlines. There would be riots on all college campuses. People would be going insane, and no one would stand for it. But it seems to be like this like selective, these standards that only apply to like certain people, which it's like a huge problem that people are just ignoring, and it's still there. I mean, it's not going away even with like a Donald Trump presidency or whatever. It's still something that has to be acknowledged.
So are there other examples of classes like this on other college campuses?
Yeah, there was in like another college, like one of the Cal State colleges had they had a whiteness forum, basically like some kind of like emergency conference in which like they got together to discuss like this like huge national problem of whiteness. I'm gonna pull it up here. It's like basically like a response to Donald Trump winning the elections and being like, look, this is like Donald Trump is proof that whiteness is a problem, and and this country is really racist, and like basically it's basically leftists responding to the elections by doubling down on their selective racism.
So, Aaron, Obama would like us to believe that despite these various examples of the worsening of race relations, they have not worsened under his presidency. So, can you tell us why this is inaccurate?
Yeah, and that's funny because he said that like right in the same interview when he was asked to comment on the BLM kidnapping video. He says, "Oh yeah, it's terrible, but race relations have gotten better and so forth." It's like, well, no. I mean, the poll. I think every poll has asked that question this year, and Rasmussen and Gallup have all overwhelmingly say that most Americans think race relations have worsened. And it's really not that hard to see why, given this most recent video, and also the fact that riots seem to happen like at a very frequent. More frequent pace now. It's like every time like someone of color is shot by a police officer, whether or not it's justified before all the facts come out, it's like riots are almost a near certainty at this point, whether they're in Ferguson or Charlotte or Wisconsin and so forth. And unfortunately, I think that Obama has been responsible for a lot of this sort of racial division. He 2009 to the police acted stupidly in regards to arresting his friend, the Cambridge professor, Henry Louis Gates from 2012, saying if I had a son, he looked like Trayvon, saying in Ferguson, this kind of stuff, not Ferguson, Baltimore, that this stuff happens all the time. And to basically slamming the police officers, the Dallas cops memorial service, and so it's really kind of ironic for him to say that race relations have gotten better when the evidence is really clear that they haven't gotten better. He's responsible he's significantly responsible for why that is.
Yeah, the statement if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon was specifically intended to kind of race bait people or incite a certain kind of reaction and promote a certain narrative. Josh, what do you think it's going to take in order to heal race relations in this country?
I think we have to look beyond tribalism. I mean, it seems like, whether it's BLM or any of the other left-wing movements, I don't see any policy solutions. I don't see any, other than these ambiguous statements like criminal justice reform or, white privilege, or just shouting these buzz terms at people. There is no attempt to look at laws in place in a nuanced way and say, okay, we should maybe look at drug sentencing laws if you think that there's disparities, and there's arguments to be made for and against that. Or we should, look at the prospect of police body cams. But, it involves policy solutions. And I think the problem is BLM has not offered any of that. BLM has not come out and said, we want to reform X, Y, and Z. Instead, they released a charter that started talking about Israel and free Palestine, which made no sense. And, they sort of supported that argument by saying, oh, people of color unite, blah, blah, blah. The people united can never be divided. Just these aphorisms and these hyperbolic statements that mean nothing. They're meaningless. And, I think the civil rights pioneers of the 60s would be appalled because they were actually fighting discrimination. And these folks are sitting in the ivory tower and protesting pronouns and shouting white privilege at everyone. And that's not a solution. I think it all goes down to policy.
So we're going to move on then, unless anybody had any other point on that topic that they want to make. We're going to move on to foreign policy. Obviously, before the show started, we were discussing the abstention vote by Obama in regarding the UN resolution on Israeli settlements. And I definitely want to have Josh open on this one. Obama's legacy as far as relations with Israel have been made pretty crystal clear. He's not a fan of Netanyahu. He's not a supporter of Israel in any respect. Josh, would you just explain to our audience, just to catch them up, what exactly was the UN resolution that passed?
So there's been several UN resolutions over the years, and this one has, nobody really expected the U.S. to make such an unprecedented move. And what the UN resolution basically said was that the settlements are Jewish settlements in the West Bank are illegally occupied by the Jewish state of Israel. And they gave a broad interpretation and definition of settlements that included the old city of Jerusalem, the Jewish district, including the Western Wall. And the Obama administration was completely okay with that. They went in, and there was some talk before the vote that U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, may abstain, but nobody wanted to believe it. Nobody could believe that Obama would betray Israel in such a blatant way on his way out. And that's what happened. He directed his UN ambassador, Samantha Power, to give this long speech, 3/4 of which criticized the UN for its myopic focus on Israel. And then she just drops the hammer, decides to abstain from the vote, and allows this resolution to pass, which effectively gives ammunition to the BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction movement. And turns Israel into more of a marginal state. The plus side of this is, if there is any, more and more people are realizing the UN is irrelevant. We have this theatrical, almost kangaroo court condemning Israel while there's 550,000 dead bodies laying in Syria. Iraq is on fire, Yemen's on fire, and the Obama administration is focusing on Israel. And this morning, there was an attack on Israeli soldiers. A Palestinian from East Jerusalem rammed his truck into 4 Israeli soldiers, killing them. He injured another 10. And not only did he ram his truck, he rammed his truck and then decided to reverse to kill more people. So he was out for blood. And the State Department just issued this really tepid response. The Palestinian side shouldn't glorify terrorism, blah, 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 without getting into specifics. But it falls on deaf ears after condemning house building. I mean, let's be clear what settlements are. They are Jewish settlers. And whether you agree with them or not, to conflate housing construction with slicing the throat of 2-year-olds, with stabbing pregnant women in the stomach, with blowing yourself up and claiming that you want to wipe Israel off the map, with Holocaust denial, with child abuse by putting your children into terrorist indoctrination camps, there is no moral equivalence. And that's what the Obama administration is doing. Kerry gave one of the most appalling speeches I have ever heard, a week ago, going on and on.
Far too long.
Yeah, and it was a protracted speech, and apparently, according to insiders, he's been wanting to give this speech for years. And this is the same man that has been going to meeting after meeting with Foreign Minister from Russia, Sergei Lavrov, shaking his hand and, coming back to the United States, promising a ceasefire with the Russian sides to stop the violence in Syria. And next thing you know, Russia's dropping barrel bombs over hospitals in Syria. So it's a farce. I mean, this administration is going out with one of the worst foreign policy legacies since Jimmy Carter. And,
right.
And it's shameful.
Yeah. So I wanna open this up to both Knowles and Pardes. Let's start with Knowles. What impact will the UN resolution have on the perception of Israel throughout the world, and the impact also on what impact also will this have on Israel's ability to defend itself?
Well, I think the UN resolution will be just as effective as every other UN resolution, which is to say, not very. But to Josh's point too, this move wasn't totally unprecedented. Jimmy Carter did send his UN ambassador to vote on I think it was March 1980. It was UN resolution 456, something like that, which was very similar in language to this resolution. It referred to Jerusalem as occupied territory, blah, 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 blah. I basically agree with Krauthammer on this, that President-elect Trump should turn the UN building into Trump condominiums. It doesn't do very much good in the world. It does quite a bit of harm in the world. And one thing I would recommend at this point is, unfortunately, Ambassador John Bolton did not get the Secretary of State pick, and he would have been my pick. But it would be just fabulous if President-elect Trump sent him to the United Nations again as UN ambassador. I think that would send the appropriate message to that organization, because as far as I can tell, the United Nations exists so that we can invite the worst people on earth to come to our best city in this country. We then invite them to condemn us, criticize us, bloviate, and then they can go and see their mistresses and go have a nice party. And then we pay for the lion's share of the whole thing. So I don't know. I don't have very much respect for the organization. And, frankly, I don't know that it will have much effect on Israel. At this point, the UN will probably make moves to join BDS and, institute sanctions and boycott Israel. But so what? The United States is about to reassert its traditional relationship with Israel and its traditional support for Israel. So great. All it does is further tarnish Barack Obama's, John Kerry's, and the United Nations sullied credibility, and that's fine by me. That's the only effect.
Well, can I just add?
Well, hang on. Let's let Pardes jump in here. Pardes, basically the same question. Do you have the same more hopeful outlook on what the impact this will have on the perception of Israel?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Michael. And I think, you can already see it in the amount of condemnations the UN has put on Israel. I mean, if you look at all the amount of condemnations that the times that they've condemned countries in the Middle East, And in Asia, like, it does not even, I don't even know if all of the condemnations from all over the world amount to how many times they've condemned Israel, which is 62 times. They've condemned Syria 17 times. They've condemned, I don't even know if they've condemned, like, they've condemned Somalia 0 times. It's insane. Afghanistan has 0 condemnations from the UN, and it makes them look dumber, and it just shows how little effect they've had on Israel. Israel has been defending themselves. Israel has been defending itself for years, and quite successfully. They don't need the help of the UN. They don't need the help of Barack Obama, and they're going to be okay with this also. It just puts the UN in a bad position, and like Michael said, it also kind of tarnishes Obama and Kerry's legacy. And now with Trump coming into office in just less than 2 weeks, their outlook seems really positive.
Yeah, I think I would probably agree with the position. Let's bulldoze the UN and turn it into a parking lot. Just cover it in cement. Be done with it. But Josh, you wanted to make another point. Let's real quick. Have you make that point.
So I mean, like, Pardes and Michael were saying, the UN resolution is largely symbolic, and here's why: Israel's relationship with the Arab world hasn't been better. It's mostly because Iran, Russia, and Syria have created this alliance with the patronage of the Obama administration, with the blessing of the Obama administration, and that's caused Israel and the Gulf states, Sunni states, to get closer. The Saudis are now working, covertly, obviously, because they can't do this out in public, with the Israelis. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who's the president of Egypt, he has a working security relationship with Egypt. The Jordanians are working with Egypt, the Qataris, the Bahrainis. And as far as Israel's security goes, I don't see this largely symbolic UN resolution, which by the way was brought forward by Senegal, New Zealand, the most irrelevant countries in the world. Nobody,
right.
Their GDP is 0. So, as far as the geopolitical situation goes, Israel is well positioned in its alliance with the surrounding Sunni states, and they should be okay for the time being.
Okay, so I do want to ask Aaron a quick question on Israel as well. Especially in light of the topic of our upcoming debate next week. What is why is it so important that the United States maintain a good relationship with Israel?
Because they're an ally, and they are, I think, our best ally. Israel, in many respects, is America. A lot of people there put their families, countries first, that kind of thing, very patriotic. And a lot of Israel's enemies are our enemies too. Hamas, right there in the Gaza Strip. The Hamas is shooting rockets at Israel, but Hamas likes to shoot rockets at us as well, and they probably would do so if they were to ever actually, God forbid, successfully strike Israel and wipe it off the map. So it is important to maintain a good relationship with Israel. So is to help defeat our enemies that are right there in the Middle East too. So so I'll talk about America first. I think actually, if you believe the mindset of America first, then it makes sense to maintain a relationship with Israel to help fight against our enemies, since they're a crucial ally in that fight.
All right, so I think we've pretty much covered that entire topic. Our last topic that I want to cover is Obamacare, because that is probably the reason why I got involved in politics so actively, I guess. This is Obama's crowning achievement as president, as I can see it. It's the only legislative action that has real lasting impacts that was passed, and Trump can't just undo it necessarily, not in the entire thing anyway, with an executive order. Aaron, can you tell us what the current state of Obamacare is?
I think it's safe to say it's really all bad, and it's just imploding everywhere. If you look at the premiums, they're skyrocketing. I think the administration said it was 25% average nationwide. Deductibles also increasing. A lot of these exchanges are bleeding insurers. In 7 states, there were only like 1 insurer being involved in the exchanges. Medicaid expansion is a serious burden on the states. It's going to bankrupt a lot of them. Like everything about it is just a total disaster. It's you know, and it's a very unpopular law. Like I think the polls mostly show that the American people are overwhelmingly against it. And that's been the case ever since it was first passed. So it really is a political winner for Trump and the Republicans to repeal it. But so far, it doesn't seem like they're going to do so because the current repeal plan that's going around is just repealing the funding mechanisms, like some of the taxes and the subsidies and so forth. And then Trump's team, I think just yesterday or the day before, said it could take years to repeal Obamacare. So I don't. Unfortunately, even though it's a disaster, I don't think Obamacare is going to really go anywhere anytime soon. You might see some trimming around the edges kind of changes to it, but nothing really substantial. And that's going to be really unfortunate for the Republicans because I think that a lot of, I think the big reason why Trump was elected to begin with was out of anger that there wasn't enough being done to fight against Obamacare. And I think a lot of people are going to feel like they've been conned, 2 or 4 years from now, and they realize that not much has been done to really fight it, even though they're in a prime position to do so.
Yeah, the crux of Obamacare is obviously the mandate that everyone purchase health insurance of some kind, or at least, purchase something to get out of the mandate. In any case, you're going to be spending money, whether it's on the fine, whether it's on insurance, or whether it's on a program that gets you out of the fine. I want to have Knowles answer this question. Do you think that Congress will even touch the mandate? Do you think the mandate would be perhaps even part of a new Trump care version of Obamacare?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it'll be very hard to run roughshod over the Freedom Caucus. So if nothing happens at all, I assume there will be some action out of Congress on it. It's a little difficult because we nominated a man who's on record supporting European-style socialized medicine and variously supporting mandates and no mandates and this and that. So the one thing we know about President-elect Trump is that we know nothing about President-elect Trump. We can't predict anything. Anyone who tells you they can is a fool or a liar. And I would say at this moment, I'm cautiously optimistic, particularly because of his nomination for Health and Human Services. By picking Tom Price was probably the leading congressional voice against Obamacare from the beginning. I would work on campaigns in 2010. He would be touring the country campaigning against Obamacare for various candidates. So that does give me a little optimism. Obviously, you really can't repeal it all in one fell swoop because it took years to implement this law, and it will take years to undo the damage that it's done. The slightly less optimistic view of things is that President-elect Trump has no interest in fully repealing the law. He wants to maybe keep the good parts, as he's said at various times. So that's something we'll have to pay attention to. But for the moment, I am holding my fire on the President-elect because so far he's exceeded my expectations in terms of conservative nominees and legislative ideas that he's talked about putting forth. So we'll have to see what happens after January 20th. But hopefully we have enough strong voices in the House and in the Senate that if the president-elect backs off his promises, that they will hold his feet to the fire.
Yeah, I can't remember who said this. In fact, it might have been Knowles that said, or maybe it was Shapiro, I'm not sure, that said we need to look at what Trump does, not what he says. I can't remember who I apologize if I'm attributing that to the wrong person. But what he says and what he does are often two very, very different things. So I think that definitely whenever I hear him talking about how, yes, we're going to lock her up, or we're going to drain the swamp, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, I'm always thinking, yeah, you say you're going to do these things, but are you actually going to do them? And then, oftentimes he does something else, especially when for a while I had thought that he was going to pick Bolton. And then I thought, oh, no, he's going to pick Romney. And then he picked somebody totally different. So definitely to that point, it's all about what he does, not what he says. So Pardes, why don't you weigh in on the Obamacare debate? Yeah.
Yeah, like what, I mean, I agree with Michael that there's room for optimism with the president-elect, but like you said, he's also been very unpredictable. And just this week, I mean, there has been talk of possible Trump care, just Obamacare with several, just a few tweaks, and I don't have any. I mean, I think it's possible that he'll do that. That he'll keep. He won't put as much effort to repeal Obamacare as he will to make it kind of like into his own kind of single payer health care or something like that. And it seems like even Obama's on board with that. He said that he would be okay with that in his own words, like he'd be okay with it, Trump care. So it doesn't seem like from their talks that he has the intention to fully repeal it. And I mean, even from Obama's own standpoint, he keeps blaming things on Congress, like why Obamacare hasn't worked. He, as always, he's got Congress to blame. So maybe it should be a little different. Hopefully, Trump will be able to not have that sort of relationship with them. But I'm not like fully optimistic on that.
Yeah, I'm a very pessimistic person, and I think that Obamacare is going to continue, and possibly with some tweaks. Certainly, I can't live next year. It's going to be repealed next year, as many have. I think that it's going to collapse. Do you think single by the end of Trump's administration? Is Josh there?
Oh, I'm having audio difficulties.
Yeah, you're kind of coming in and out.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Can you repeat?
Hang on. Yeah, hang on. I've lost you. Okay. Do you think that Obamacare is going to last through the Trump presidency? Is basically the gist of the question.
So, Trump has his pulse on, on what people are feeling, and I think that Trump is going to do what benefits Trump. We saw with the when Speaker Ryan proposed scrapping the Office of Congressional Ethics, Trump came out against that because you had constituents calling in, and it was incredibly unpopular. So what the Republicans are going to need to do, marketing and messaging is going to be important, because what Obama's counter argument at the moment is that when all the Republicans have is the repeal element, they don't have the replace element. And that's going to leave millions and millions and millions uninsured. Obviously, that's fear-mongering, that's hyperbole, but he's going to capitalize on this argument, and so are Democrats. And Democrats have already said that they're going to fight Obamacare repeals tooth and nail. So I think if Trump gets the sense that the GOP isn't in line with what the people want, and and his definition of the people could, we don't know what that is, but it's just whatever. And like Michael said, we don't know what he's going to do, but it very much seems like he wants to do what's popular. And if he doesn't get the sense that repealing Obamacare is popular, or if the GOP plan is messaged and packaged well, he's not going to put forth the effort to do that. And right now, the Republican Party has a unified government. And if voters sense that they stumble, they don't do well with reforming Obamacare, they don't keep their promises, voters are going to punish them in the midterm elections. So, Trump is aware of that, and Trump, obviously, he wants to be a two-term president. So he has no problem creating a schism between himself, the Trump administration, and the GOP. So we can't rely on him to repeal Obamacare.
That actually may even benefit him to have a schism between himself and the GOP, as it has in the primaries and in the general election.
And let's say the Obamacare, the push to repeal Obamacare falls on deaf ears, or doesn't go well, or there's logistical difficulties. What Trump's going to do, he's going to back off, and he's going to brush himself of blame. He doesn't care. He's willing to take out with his allies and enemies if it means coming out on top and looking good. So I think the GOP is going to have to play this smart, and they're going to have to give Trump a deal he can't refuse.
All right. So, Aaron, just to wrap up the Obamacare discussion, what are your predictions for Obamacare in the future, just in more premium terms? Because I have a Bernie supporting leftist friend who posted on Facebook this last week about how excited he was to have his healthcare plan, and it's affordable and it's just a great deal and this and that. And I refrained from commenting because I know that in the next couple years he's going to definitely be seeing some changes to that plan of his. So just as far as premium costs, what are we looking at in terms of increases?
Well, I would say it depends what exactly is with Obamacare, but assuming that not much changes, I think the Congressional Budget Office said that within 10 years, premiums rise by 26, 28%. And I think their internal White House numbers that had as many as 93 million people being uninsured, because once that employer mandate kicks in, there's going to be a lot more of a push, or there's going to be more incentives for employers to kind of drop people off, their employer healthcare plans and into the exchanges and so forth. So it's not good. Again, it really all depends what the Republicans do. Right now, I don't see much other than just trimming around the edges, and that's really unfortunate because Obamacare was passed through the reconciliations process, which basically means that it only needs 51 votes in the Senate to pass 4 terms of a budget, because that's something what reconciliations is used for budgetary matters. And so they could do the same thing with Obamacare. I think Paul Ryan said a few years ago that you could repeal 85% of it using that process. So you could bypass Schumer and the Democrats altogether by doing that. But so far I haven't seen that the Republicans are willing to go that far with repealing Obamacare. It's just the funding mechanisms. And that could be a problem, because if you repeal some of those taxes and subsidies, it might increase costs even further, and that might give people the wrong idea. That's like repealing Obamacare causes our premiums to go up. What? That's not what we were told. So they really are playing with fire by not just going full on repeal and just trimming on the edges. And we'll see what happens, but I'm not too optimistic about it.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Twitter and see if we have any questions. So next week, I want to make sure to announce we are going to have a special episode featuring a debate between our own Aaron Bandler and Nicholas J. Fuentes. You can follow him on Twitter to see what his opinions are on the issue we are going to be debating, which is Israel, and what the United States role should be in promoting their security, and what our relationship with them should be in the future. So that's going to be pretty exciting. I know that there's been a lot of talk on Twitter about this debate because we have some very different points of view coming on the show next week. So make sure you watch this. It's going to be very exciting. Let's see. Do we have any Twitter questions? We do not have any Twitter questions today, which is unusual. All right. So at the end of the show, for those of you who have not been on before, we give shout outs to people that we want to have more followers on Twitter. So I'm going to start by giving a shout out to my dad at A Heart for God. Go and follow him. It's not like he's in need of followers, but go follow him anyway. And follow at Elliot R. Hams. He's quite fantastic, especially on foreign policy. Yes. And follow at Harry1T6, because he is one of the funniest people you will ever find on Twitter. So that's Harry Kachatrian from the Daily Wire as well. So let's have Pardes give her shout outs first.
And of course, at Amanda Presto.
Oh,
so
yes!
Amanda Presto. She's also pretty funny on Twitter.
And she's also verified, so you'll be able to know which account that is.
Yes. And I'm actually just reading one of her tweets. A fan just dubbed me the most miserable person at the Daily Wire. I hate feeds myself. It's so funny.
All right. Knowles, do you have anybody to shout out from Twitter or other places?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give 3.
Mhm.
Obviously, you got to follow Andrew Clavin. We'll be on the show tomorrow doing, we're going to be covering the cultural aspects of the Golden Globes tonight. I can't believe I have to sit through just 3 hours of
That sounds terrible.
giving statues to each other. I'll even say you should follow Ben Shapiro, even though he owes me $400 still from the election. But Welch or not, he's very funny on Twitter. He's a good account to follow. And one last one is James Toronto. He did Best of the Web at the Wall Street Journal. He just had his last column, and it's one of the best columns on the internet. He would just round up all of the best things that you need to look for on the web. But now I believe he's the op-ed page editor or editorial editor or something like that. But anyway, follow him. He's very funny and very, very snarky. So
what's his Twitter handle?
They're all 3 of them are just their names. So at James Toronto, at Andrew Clavin, and at Ben Shapiro.
I have one more. Can I jump in?
Go ahead.
Lindsay Boring at Voxy Lady. So VOXEY Lady. She's pretty awesome, and she's the makeup lady on the Daily Wire show. The famous makeup lady that everybody loves and wants to see more of. But she's currently not in LA, but I think she's pretty awesome on Twitter too.
She gets some pretty intense fan mail, let me just say. All right.
Yeah.
Let's Josh, do you have anybody to shout out?
So I think you guys should all follow the Office of the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, which is at ODNI.gov, and read the Declassified Intelligence Community Report on Russian hacking, because it's pretty important. And
conversely, you can just follow the Russian hackers and read everything.
At Lucifer
Either way, you'll get
2.0 at WikiLeaks.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you can do that too. Follow the Syrian White Helmets at Syria Civil DEF. They do great work in terms of dispatching rescue workers to the most war-torn parts of Syria. And that's it.
All right, Aaron, do you have anybody to shout out?
Yeah, well, to start with, Josh Hammer, who's a writer of the Resurgence, has a lot of good stuff on Twitter. Give him a follow. Jonah Goldberg at Jonah NRO has a lot of really hilarious stuff too, as does Twitter accounts Comfortably Swellic and Neon Taster, both also really funny accounts. Also at Sports Talk Joe, it's accuses of some funny parody account stuff with Sean King. His hilarious, and also his parody accounts is very sports reporters too. Also funny. And give a follow to Ariel Davidson. That's at Political L. She has a lot of interesting stuff on Israel and other policy matters. So, yeah.
All right. So unless we have any shout outs that we've forgotten, I'm going to close it out. So thank you guys all for coming. I really enjoyed having this discussion with you all.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yeah. Go ahead.
This is our Daily Wire office crew. And this is the writer's room.
That's right.
Before we dispersed.
Yeah, I actually was going to name this episode Return to the Writer's Room, but I didn't think anybody would get it except for the 4 of us.
That would have been
So,
good.
yeah. Anyway, that is.
We definitely had a lot of fun in there. And
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, we did.
And I learned
For sure.
a lot.
Yeah.
Had a lot of good educating.
Yeah, I'm glad that somebody caught on to that. Thank you very much, Pardes. All right, so again, thank you guys all for coming and enjoying the Return to the Writer's Room episode. And we will be going off the air, but everyone say goodbye to the audience. Goodbye to the audience. We have 5 live viewers. Here we go. All right.